Oh, and we're
Woo!
live. We're here. Oh my goodness.
Hello.
Hello, everyone. 'Tis I, Madame Askew, and I'm here with my very special guest, Piper J. Drake. Hello, Piper.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you
Oh my
so much for
goodness.
having me.
Oh, thank you for being my guest. It's so wonderful to have you here, to have you all to myself in
Oh,
conversation. I mean, not quite strictly speaking all to myself. I'm sharing you with everyone who's going to be watching us. But normally we're meeting over a meal and tea with friends. And
we are.
it's a wonderful wild reverie and all sorts of things. But this is wonderful to be here with you, talking about your work and your adventures. Piper, oh my goodness, you are an author
I am,
and
indeed.
uh, you are a bon vivant, a traveler, you are a digital nomad, and you have a new book coming out
I
very soon.
do.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, Fangs So Brightly Deadly comes out just next month, almost only just 4 weeks or so, 5 weeks away. September
5
24th.
weeks.
September 24th is when it goes live everywhere on all the retail sites.
So exciting. And pre-order links are up now, I believe, right?
Absolutely. Yes, they are. You can find all of the information, appropriate information on my website, piperjdrake.com. But you can also search on Fangs So Bright and Deadly. And there are actually some early reviews because it was
Ooh.
up on NetGalley. My kind publisher put it up on NetGalley. And so we have some early reviews that seem very positive. I try not to read my own reviews, but my assistant tells me that the
This.
reviews are quite positive.
That's
And
wonderful.
you
Yeah,
happen to have an early copy.
I oh, I do. I do. It's sort of a naked copy, but it's
It was. The cover wasn't finalized yet, but the wait was
so
worth
good.
it. The cover's
Yeah.
stunning.
Right. And you
Ah,
really listen. This isn't even a question. This is more of a gush. You treated me to this really charming little foxy bookmark, which I love, and
yes,
it matches my frock. Mhm.
it does.
So,
I loved that.
but so
I used to do origami quite a bit when I was younger, and I really enjoyed it because I was a Japanese anime fan. Had a blip. We had a blip. Friend, we might have some Wi-Fi blips. Please do be
but we're gonna
patient.
keep our fingers crossed.
But
Yes.
yes, we are.
So you
But
were
in
an
any case,
anime
I used to
fan.
watch Japanese anime quite a lot. Yes, I am still. In fact, I just don't consume it quite at the rate that I did when I was younger and had more time. But I also got into various things like Japanese origami and the paper folding, especially folding 1,000 paper cranes is pretty classic. But some of the very cute things, and I really enjoyed this because I went to high school in southern New Jersey, and I had somewhat diverse high school experience
Mm.
in southern New Jersey, although I was very much in the minority, as were most marginalized identities. But there were at least some of us. So in
Mm.
a class of 990 something for my graduating class, I was one of, perhaps like 10 or 12 Asian students.
Oh my goodness.
So we were there, but we were definitely in the minority. But I remember in middle school, a teacher had decided to do a section on following instructions. And to teach us how to follow instructions, she gave us these handouts on how to follow the instructions to fold origami things like the bookmark that you have in your hand. And I always decided to retain it because I just thought the fox was so cute.
So
And
cute.
there are different versions, like you can do bunnies, I think you can do pandas, but the fox, and just such a fun add to this particular book because two of our main characters are fox spirits. One is a
Yes,
kitsune
they.
and one is a
Oh,
gumo.
they're so good. You're
They're good.
listen, not one but two foxes. What a gift.
Because why choose?
Why
Why
choose?
choose? That is, friends, we should have this as a thing where, perhaps if you are going in because you're more of an urban fantasy reader or you're more of a
Mhm.
fantasy reader and perhaps not as experienced a romance reader. I do come from romance and I do fairly evenly balance the romance with the suspense plotting. And there is a heist in this one,
Yes, yes, there's a
but we do
heist.
have some,
Oof.
yes, but we do have some relatively intense moments of character development and relationship development, and some of them get a bit explicit, friends.
Yes. Yeah, it's a little spicy on the page, but you know what? There is truth in advertising because you never bury that lead on your social media, on your website, anywhere that you talk about your writing. You're very open that you write some saucy things. And I love that, where you talk about your writing and your career. But also, as a long time reader of your things, I started out when you were rehabbing dogs and having adventures with these,
Oh, yes.
former military dogs. But you have this ability to blend genres very seamlessly, to the point where as a reader I often
Thank you.
forget that there's a blending. But this particular series, the new series we're talking about, that this is book 2 coming out, Things So Bright and Deadly, but it starts out with your wonderful Wings Once Cursed and Bound. Oh, and
Yes,
you are,
the first book in my Mythwoven series.
yes, it's beautiful, and you're blending urban fantasy with different kinds of mystery adventures and the romance elements. You do it so beautifully. Are you a reader of all these genres? Is this something where you're like, why choose? I love
Thank
everything.
you.
Let's put it
Now, I
into a book.
think we are another blip. Oh no.
Ah, all right. That's okay. We are going to persevere
Oh
over
no.
blips.
Another blip. Have I come back? Are we coming
You're
back?
back. You're back. You're here.
Oh no.
You're here.
Yes, we have
We're
blips,
going
but
to,
I'm starting to hear you again. I'm
good.
back. Okay.
Good. Okay, good.
Indeed. And I can see you
Yes.
again. Fantastic.
Even better. All right.
Okay, we
Good.
may have a 1 or 2 second delay, friends, so let's just have patience for any said delays.
Mm.
Okay, so I think I heard a question from you as to whether or not I read the various genres that I
That you blend.
is that.
Right, we're going to
Oh no.
pause for a catch up. Uh, and I'm going to just give Piper's Wi-Fi a moment to sort of settle down and stop being a fox spirit and being a trickster today. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here. I'm so happy to have you here, and I'm delighted to have Piper joining us. And Piper's Wi-Fi is being Wi-Fi. It's being difficult. So we're going to be patient and let that catch back up. Welcome back.
I have come back. Hooray! Okay,
Yay! Excellent.
so let's try that again. If I remember
Yes.
correctly, the last question I heard you ask was whether or not I consume the genres that I tend to blend.
Yes.
Indeed, I do. Okay, good, good, good. So you mentioned the True Hero series, which is
Yes.
about military veterans and also working dogs, and second chances to build a life. Now, the romantic suspense that I wrote for the True Hero series does not blend magical elements. This is all very, very much romantic suspense in a
Yes.
contemporary setting. No
Mm-hmm.
magical elements to be found unless you just really, really love very good dogs.
They're so good.
I will say the saucy moments happen between my military veterans and human love interests. The dog is there to add in a bet to the situation. Always, but the dogs shine quite nicely. And I will have to admit that I had never read romantic suspense prior to being asked to write it. And so once I
Mm.
was asked, "Hey, can you think about this? Could you give it a swing?" I said, "Let me go read some." because I very much feel that if I'm going to write a genre or try to take
Mm,
a swing at the
mm,
genre, I should read some representations of it first before I try to put my own spin on it.
yeah.
Which it's always interesting in traditional publishing because sometimes your book is marketed in a genre that you didn't expect. Perhaps you pitched it as
Right.
something else. Um, and so, what I can tell you is that I consumed a lot of romantic suspense television drama. You would see romantic lines and romantic arcs in shows like Criminal Minds or NCIS. And so I took a lot of experience from that. Hawaii Five-O was another one. Um, so I did imbibe in that. But once there was an opportunity for me to write back in the paranormal romance and the fantasy, or what's being considered, or the term coined right now is romantasy,
Romanticy.
um, I was much more in my element
Mm.
because I I grew up reading science fiction and fantasy. I think I started in fantasy with Terry Brooks's Shannara series back
Yes.
in second and third grade, and I moved on in my late elementary school, early middle school to Anne McCaffrey and the Dragon Riders of Pern, which is
Oh,
starts out sci-fi because it is a colonization ship, a human colony ship that lands on Pern. But the majority of the series is quite a few generations later when they've forgotten that they actually were colonizing the planet and they had abandoned the southern continent for the northern continent. Um, and so, dragons everywhere.
dragons.
And then, of course, Anne McCaffrey had quite a lot of space opera. If you followed like the Rowan and all of the telepathic, telekinetic series, and The Ship Who Searched was my favorite sci-fi slash space opera series. Um, and I would wander through fantasy as well. Again, with the Elfstones of Shannara was one of my absolute favorite fantasy books. And then somewhere along the way, I stumbled into Patricia Briggs and her fantasy, early fantasy. So we're talking
Yes,
about the
yes.
Hobbs bargain.
The
We're
Hobbs
talking,
bargain.
yes, right, the Hobbs bargain. We're
Oh,
talking about the dragon, and we're also talking about When Demons Walk, the C&M series.
yes,
Her Raven
yes,
series, the duology, Raven Strike and Raven Shadow, I think. And
yes.
and of course Hurog. My mother loved Hurog.
Hurog.
Hurog
I
means
love that one.
Hurog means dragon, right? And then I stumbled into much darker fantasy elements with Anne Bishop's Black Jewels trilogy and Friends. More recently, she has been writing fantasy with the Others series, which gives a lot more contemporary feels to it. But the Black Jewels trilogy, talk about decadent, dark chocolate fantasy elements with a unique magic system,
Mm,
a matriarchal society,
mm,
and oh my gosh, these characters. Love it. So, yes, I absolutely consumed a lot of fantasy.
mm.
Consumed a lot of fantasy in what I was watching too when it came to mostly anime. I
Yeah.
will say I was very much a lover of the Clamp series like Triple X Holic and Card Captor Sakura was much more urban fantasy, right? But they use the same characters in a couple of other shows that were crossovered with Triple X Holic are escaping me. Revolutionary Girl Utena. I
I'm
should have
I'm
known
s
back then that I was bi. Like I should have. I should have
I
with
am
that.
I am a little sad that the Grand Arbiter isn't here right now because these are some of his favorite anime and he loves talking about them. And yes, I mean, that is one of those moments where you're like, how didn't I know that I was
Exactly.
queer all along?
Well, it was so funny because I really did think I was straight, rather aggressively straight. I'm just an aggressive personality. When you meet me, you know. We thought I was for years and years and years and years. And in fact, we have a common friend, Gail Carriger. And when we
Yes.
first met, we were chatting about various things, and somehow the topic came up. And I had mentioned like I have almost all queer friends, but I happen to be the token aggressively straight one of the bunch. And she goes, "Oh, mm-hmm. You think so? Well then." And she has this way to look at you over her glasses in which she
Yes.
knows something that you don't know, but it's fine.
Mhm.
if
Oh,
you want to go on believing that until you
oh
come to
yes,
you come to the realization yourself. And when I did, she was
absolutely.
like, "Oh, darling, let's go have some tea.
And tea, right? Tea and tea at that point.
Let's have tea and tea."
I can hear this conversation even though I wasn't present, because first of all, you've nailed like her phrasing and the way she talks about these things, but also just that presentation where she has known, sort of like Lord Akildama,
Oh,
that
yes. Lord
the
Akeldama would
secrets.
be my absolute favorite person to constantly go to when I'm having some kind of crisis of conscience.
Yes, yes.
Absolutely. I
Oh,
love her Parasol Protectorate series, I must say.
wonderful.
Although I'm very fond of her Divinity 36 series as well.
Oh my goodness, they're
I
amazing.
do love science fiction slash science fiction romance, and we both have
Yes,
an enjoyment of K-dramas and K-pop.
yes,
And it is
yes.
really her fault, quite honestly, that I have the current bias that I have in K-pop because she got me to watch Legendary Wars,
Mm.
just a couple years ago, and I had thought that I was BTS ARMY. I had thought that I was, and my little
Oh,
sister
oh,
also very strongly BTS ARMY.
right. This was a question someone asked, if you were
Yes, and
BTS
then
Army.
I am BTS ARMY, but I have to admit my bias wrecker happened because of Gail Carriger. It's totally
Mm,
her fault. She
mm,
got me to watch Kingdom Legendary War, and Lee Min-hyuk from B2B completely wrecked my bias to
mm.
the point where I'm shook. I can't and I'm sorry, but Lee Min-hyuk, that man, his Instagram is
Mm.
giving. It's so
Oh,
giving, and most recently, he was on Water Bomb in Korea, and the content is so saucy. And he
so
has a brother. And his brother is equally unfairly. The two of them did a photo shoot together not too long ago.
that's just unkind, but also kind.
But respectfully, my goodness,
Oh my
absolutely wrecked my
goodness.
bias. And I have to admit, I do really appreciate all rounders in the K-pop world. I do listen to quite a lot of Blackpink and Mamamoo. If you're asking for who my bias is in of the female presenting K-pop artists, it is Wasa from Mamamoo
Okay,
because
good. Oh, oh, but listen, now that we've talked about K-pop,
yes,
we have to talk about your most recent release, uh, Idol with Love, which
yes.
is your. So I'm not going to blame Gail. She's not even here. That wouldn't be kind. But I would say that, I love space opera. I love it. And Gail is sort of like, hear me out, space K-pop opera
Well,
with
Divinity
the
36 definitely is. It is in the
right,
same universe as oh, The Fifth Gender
the fifth
and Crud
gender,
Rad.
all the
And I had
TV
read those
stars.
first. I was
They're so
around
good.
when she came up with the concept and was working on Divinity 36 and the rest of the
Yes.
series.
And so that you're doing your own thing here, which is also like not the same. Everyone, they're different,
They're very
different,
different, but if you
but
finish the Divinity 36 and you're looking for shenanigans in space,
with K-pop,
with K-pop elements, we have an
right?
Idol with Love because
Yes.
I decided, and for the BTS ARMY friends there, you can definitely picture your favorite bias, particularly when your favorite bias has decided for this particular comeback to dye their hair like um, purple or pink or blue, some of the very shocking colors.
Hmm.
I decided that my burnt out K-pop idol who's in need of a break and has been sent off to this space station on the edge of nowhere that is on the way to
Right.
everywhere, but no one ever stays. It's like one of those transient places. If you're from South Jersey, you know what Cape May is, right? Like nobody stays. Everybody just pops by and then moves on again, right? Like it's like a rest stop on a major highway. Um, I shouldn't say Cape May is that because it's really not. Cape May is more of a vacation spot where people come for the weekend to stay to the shore and
Then they
they wander
scamper.
off again. But the idea here is that very few people live at the
Mm.
space station, and he's been pushed off there by his agent, and he's a burnt out K-pop idol. very, very much like Han from Stray Kids kind of vibes, or Jimin from BTS Army
Mm,
kind of
mm,
vibes.
mm,
Um, but he's definitely a grown man, and we've
mm.
got bodyguards that have been enlisted for him too.
Ooh,
Shapeshifters in space,
oof,
because
ooh,
shapeshifters. Um, and yes, An Idol with Love, and even the title, you can tell I'm Army.
mm. Honestly, it was that book where somebody asked me, "Is is Piper Drake like BTS Army?" And I was like, "Listen, I can't even answer this question until I Google what these words mean. I
You are
have to
not wrong. Whoever guessed that, well done.
so so you are a K-pop stan, and you have brought that into this particular book, but it's this book, Idle with Love, is also building on some previous writing you've done, because you have quite the back catalogue. And
I do.
not only are you a voracious reader, but you've been a prolific writer. This is a gift to all of you watching. Piper has a lot of good books for you to read. Once you finish the current series and you're like, oh no, what will I read? Don't worry, there's
There's
more.
backlist.
Right back.
You're
But
correct.
you've written about shapeshifters in space previously, and you've referenced some of that work in Idle with Love. It's not necessary to have read those books to enjoy it, but I love that there's this sort of like, you've developed this wonderful universe in space,
Thank you.
shapeshifters, and then you're just like, and here's my burnt out K-pop star who needs a little shapeshifter love in his
with
life.
with a very grumpy bodyguard, right? She is very grumpy, and she's a bit prickly, a bit like a hedgehog, right? Very
Yeah,
soft belly, but
yeah,
like she's very prickly. And she could kill you. I
easily.
For the Triton experiment universe, shall we say, I do enjoy heroines who are very, very good at killing and very bad at feelings. Tend to be that kind of grumpy. And then I like to match them with very competent, very skilled matches, but their
Mm,
competencies are in different places,
mm,
right? Like,
mm.
so in An Idol with Love, we have a match of this very rakish station engineer, um, who she's like, no, we're not getting into this. We're too intense for each other. We're too intense, just the two of us. It would be bad. We would start making mistakes that would get
Oh,
people killed,
if
right?
it was just the two of us, what would we do?
Exactly. Whereas if we add our K-pop idol, everybody balances out quite nicely. Because again, this year with my releases seems to be the year of me releasing why choose romantic stories.
Yes,
Why
yes.
choose?
Why
Because
choose?
I have been damaged too much by K-dramas where I've fallen in love second lead syndrome.
Oh,
Telling you the way that I want to gather up certain second leads in various K-dramas, True Beauty being one of them, where I just want to
mm,
gather up the second lead and then find him a love story. And why did we have to choose anyway? Could we not have had why?
yes, yes. Oh my goodness. Listen to so Sarah says she just tuned in, and this book sounds amazing. It's called Idle with Love, and it is fantastic. I highly recommend it. Wonderful book.
Thank you.
So charming. And I love that you're in your wide shoes era. So I just, for those of you who may not be avid romance readers, as I am, as Piper is, Piper's also an avid romance writer, why choose usually indicates that you don't choose between your love triangle. You just become a very delightful equilateral triangle in love, which is
Indeed.
delightful.
Or could be more. I thus far have not written more than triads,
No.
but polyamorous group, basically.
Yes.
It's not
Yes.
limited to three. Um, I to date have not written more than a triad, but I do know several authors who have very delicious polyamorous queer
Mm,
stories, and they're well done.
yeah.
Sometimes, though, it does take, because you not only want to introduce each of the characters and develop them as their own individual, but
Yeah.
you want to kind of give time to the development of the relationships between each of the characters. So the more in characters you have involved in your romantic relationship, I think the more time you need to spend with the interactions between each set
Yeah.
of people so that they develop a steady certainty that they all want to be together. Because the more, let's face it, love is hard, right? Love
Yes.
is hard. And the more people you involve in a loving relationship, the more exponentially difficult it gets to get
Mm.
that chemistry right.
Mm.
Please excuse me.
Especially on the page. Like, it's hard enough to do it in reality with other people, but to balance that on the page as an author, and to do this thing that you describe so beautifully, of that loving certainty in the relationship. Honestly, I don't think there's even a question here. This is just a compliment. You do it very beautifully. I've just read 2 books where you walk that balancing act, and you manage it so deliciously. I've read all sorts of things and many attempts at achieving this, and some people do a stellar job, but there's also, some ham-fisted writing out there that there are people who just don't quite hit the mark for me. And
Mhm.
I know there's always a bias involved when you're reading, a subjective experience, but you bring this sort of respectful, balanced approach. And honestly, that's true of all of your books, where you have so much respect for your characters, really comes through the page. And you have this gorgeous thing I want to talk a little bit about, because you're coming up in this time of romance writing, and we talked about the Black Jewels series earlier, and that series of books was very pivotal at the time, because there's a lot of discussion about consent, and
Yes. The
things that
matriarchal society, consent, all of that. Yes.
and it
Romance,
had
I
not.
think, has always been on the cutting edge of ensuring that consent, not just one time, but repeatedly
Mm-hmm.
through an interaction
Yes.
is often there, right? And also
Yes.
romance makes it sexy. It's not
Yes.
awkward. Or if it's
So
awkward, it's
good.
endearingly awkward
Yeah.
in that it wins trust.
Yes. Well, and so I noticed it in particularly in these 2 books in your Myth Woven series. With the first book, we've got this sort of beautiful Thai, mythological creature, the Kimmerie, coming
Mhm.
to life in our heroine character, who is pairing up with a vampire. And he's always checking it. He's like, I'm a vampire. I could eat you. I could kill you.
He's also
I don't want.
significantly older, so he's
Oh,
gotta check in over and over again,
yes, he
right?
every time he makes sure, and it's never tedious. It's just like, oh yes, please check in again. I need you to check in just so I can enjoy you checking in, and you
Yes.
you do that again in this. It's clearly something that's very important to you. I also feel like it's part of your respect, not just for yourself and the choices you might make in your own personal life, as a human being working through the world, but for your characters and your readers. It's a very beautiful dynamic you develop. Is
Thank you.
that, do you feel like when you came into writing romance, it was just sort of a more fertile time to be like, yes, we do consent? Or is this something that you always knew that you were going to be putting that into your stories?
So I first started writing romance around 2009. My first release was 2010. And I think that discourse, people get better and better at
Mm.
expressing the thoughts
Mhm.
around certain concepts over time. And
Mm.
they find and they gain nuance when you have more discourse together. And so I think we've really come a long way in discourse and what we're looking for. Um, and consent is key, has
Yeah.
always been key in romance. Yes, romance in the early days, definitely you had bodice rippers and there is a place, especially in dark romance,
Mm.
for what we call consensual non-con. consensual
Yes.
non-consent, where you have a distinct scene in
Mm,
which the participants agree in advance that this is what excites them,
mm,
but also
mhm.
this is how we get out of the scene if it becomes too much, right? Like whether that be a
Yes.
safe word, whether that could be as formal and as structured as knowing that this is a scene and knowing that there's a safe word, right? And using that vocabulary. Or when people aren't necessarily as educated or involved in a lifestyle that has familiarity with those terms, they may just communicate that they do like to be overpowered, but they do want to be able to opt out if it
Yes.
gets too intense. So that's always been there since I joined romance and started reading romance. And so it's been there for a very, very long time. So, of course, there are aspects where it's titillating or exciting in some cases for many to be overpowered or to have a feeling of being made to feel delicate or
Mm,
someone to be desired, right?
mm.
And then there
Yeah.
are other people who really, really appreciate consent, but in the early days would feel a bit awkward. Like, how do I break this moment of intensity to
Yes.
ask? And I think back to the first time a person asked if he could kiss me. And
Mm,
I remember I was taken back by it because no one had ever asked before. They had always come in really slow and given me plenty of time to escape,
mm.
right? But they had never come out and asked before. And I realized, wow, first of all, I'm blown away by this moment
Mm,
that he asked, and also I can understand how people would feel that that might be awkward, right? So finding ways to write those scenes and realize that it can be incredibly, incredibly compelling to
so
have
good.
those check-ins, and then understanding with discourse over the years that not only that first time of saying yes, but checking in, and then
Mm,
also because unfortunately, there have been a lot of cases and a bajillion cases that haven't been reported, but we have
mm.
learned that a defense is often, "Well, she said yes at first,"
Yeah.
and but that doesn't mean that consent is ongoing,
Right.
right?
Or that you can't withdraw your consent.
Exactly, and so the concept of writing scenes and representing that, yes, we check in every step of the way.
Yeah. Yes.
Every step of the way,
Yes.
and also make sure that your partners understand that they can opt out and you won't be mad at them, right?
Yeah.
Because that is power dynamic and that is trust. And
Yeah.
there sometimes it is an act of trust to trust your partner to take no for an answer, to
Yeah.
trust your partner not to get mad at you because you've given feedback. Right? Like, because 'cause we're not just talking about consent, we're also talking about what makes me feel good, what makes you feel good.
Right.
Um, a lot of times, like, you could be in the middle of having sex and you may politely not mention that they're bumping your cervix and it's really uncomfortable. It's taking you out of the pleasure of the experience, but they're having a great time and you just
Yeah.
don't want to mention it. But there's trust and there's vulnerability in saying, "Hey, we need to adjust position just a bit if you really
Right.
want me to be enjoying this as much as you are."
Just can we take a moment? Can we shift? Could we do a little yoga stretching, some deep
Whatever
breathing,
we need to
whatever?
do,
Yeah.
right? Exactly,
Right.
just adjust a bit. And I think that that is also key to demonstrate through the course of a book and the course of escalating intimate encounters
Yeah.
that the participants, the people that are involved in that romantic relationship learn each other's tells, what each other likes, and how important is it is to each other that everyone involved
Yeah.
be enjoying themselves.
Ugh. Yes. And honestly, the way you weave that in with developing your characters throughout the story and their interplay outside of the bedroom is really, listen, everyone, it's delightful. And it makes me as a reader think, oh, this is what a healthy relationship could look like. The fact that it happens to be between a vampire and a kinnery, or a witch and two fox shifters,
Spirits, yes.
fox spirits,
In
fox spirits.
particular, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
very careful about that because, some translations might go and call a kitsune or a gumiho a fox demon.
Mm,
You know, kitsune in particular, might be sometimes referred to as a type of yokai or, shinigami.
yeah.
And you know what? There is nuance to that conversation that could be explored. We don't need to jump off on that tangent this time, but I'm trying to be careful to describe them as
Mm,
fox spirits because, depending on the mythology behind either one of them and where they came from, demon is not anything involved. Not the US English connotation
mm,
of
mm,
demon
mhm,
is not the origin of
mm,
either of those beings. And Gumiho are definitely known to be much more bloodthirsty, I think, and much more violence prone. They have a tendency to have a hunger for the liver or the heart,
mm,
and bloody violence. And so my character Joe does struggle with that more.
yeah,
Whereas I chose to take Kuro in the direction of the elements of kitsune related mythology in which they are seductresses or seductors.
yeah,
And so he's much more gains his sustenance from sexual energy.
yeah.
And that's a difficult discussion to have, and I think important when you're about to enter into a relationship with somebody who also um, has sexual interactions with people outside of the relationship.
Mm. Yeah, I you there's a wonderful moment in the book in which our heroine, our witch, is having that conversation with Kuro, and I wasn't expecting it. You took me in a place as a reader I wasn't expecting, or expecting rather, but I really loved that moment because I thought, oh gosh, to be able to have that adult, very safe, not a judgmental space for the conversation, but a space where they could be honest. I thought, oh, these people, they've got a future. They can have real, healthy conversation. It, you handled it beautifully, but it's also
Thank you.
the way you worked it into the story was so lovely, and the
Thank you.
timing of
And I
things.
took risks, right? Like I was
Yeah,
a little bit
yeah,
concerned because it is not a mainstream acceptance, the idea of a lot of s- sexual freedom
mm-hmm,
is not mainstream as much as we have a better understanding of it these days.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And in fact, we're seeing that in bookstores. We're seeing that in bookstore policies and retailer policies where um, they're starting first with, oh, we're just looking at these special cases in which
Mm-hmm.
um, perhaps AI generated or spammed works are out there that we're removing. But with
Yeah,
the policy in place, let's an aspect of me is that I do hold down a day job in a corporate environment.
mm-hmm.
It is a corporate tactic to establish a policy theoretically just for specific use cases and
Mm-hmm.
lull people into a sense of complacency
Yeah,
and say, oh no, this policy is here just for these use cases. Don't be worried. And then they'll wait 6 months, a year, 2 years. Anyone who has experienced where their company has had a merger and they've been told, don't worry, it'll be business as usual. Don't worry. 6 months, a year later, 2 years later, suddenly there's layoffs. And no
yeah,
one saw it coming because they were lulled into a sense of complacency. We're seeing that in the
yeah.
fact that there's the book bannings in the school districts and the libraries. There's labeling of erotica. And how often
Yes.
is something that is not accepted by the mainstream considered erotic, right?
Right.
That could be queer. And I'm sorry, but
Yes.
there's so many adorably sweet, gentle,
Yes.
heartwarming, queer
Yes.
romances out there. My little sister is a major, major reader of yaoi manga.
Yeah.
And some of those love stories are so, so precious and so
Right?
sweet. They're not erotica just because they're queer. And,
No.
but you can easily
Mm.
imagine that the erotica label will be assigned to queer. It'll be assigned
Yes.
to interracial because how
Yes.
often do people I'm very familiar with yellow fever, being Asian myself.
Oh,
How often do people fetishize or um, um, just fantasize over interracial experiences? So suddenly, it's not that far a step to say, well, that's erotica too, even
right.
if it's a sweet, low spice,
Yes.
shall we
Yes.
say, story. Just the fact that it is queer or it is interracial or it is another marginalized identity featured in the story, that's erotica because it's not vanilla.
Right. And so, for those of you who are perhaps not up to date, Barnes and Noble just did a thing where it was a takedown of all the erotica as ebooks from their online platform, and who knows how that will affect
And they're introducing
physical
filters
books. Yes.
to ensure that erotic labeled books don't show up on search. That's not going to impact traditional published authors,
No.
but it will impact indie. And I am a hybrid personally,
Yeah.
as are quite a few authors that I know, in which I
Yes.
have some titles that are traditionally published, which is, the Mythwoven series that we've been talking about
Yes.
is traditionally published through source books. First book is Wings Once Cursed and Bound, the book that we were
Mm.
just recently talking about, with
Yes.
our wide choose romance between our witch, our gumiho, and our kitsune, is titled Fangs So Bright and Deadly. They come from source books. They're traditionally published. They won't be impacted by this erotic label and filtering or removal from the retail sites.
Right.
However, some of my projects are indie, like my Triton Experience series, like An Idol with Love, my burnt
Mm.
out K-pop idol, and my Shapeshifters in Space that we were talking about recently. Um, and that is indie. It's still
Yeah.
available through Barnes and Noble, Amazon, Kobo, Google Play, but that could get tagged as
Yeah.
erotica and removed. I haven't seen it yet, but it could.
It could.
And
It easily could.
it will always be the indie authors who suffer first, right?
Yeah.
Because Barnes& and Noble has said trad publishing will not be impacted yet. There's
Yes.
always
For
for
now.
now and
For
yet.
now. So it's a good
Silently
thing,
attached to all of these statements.
right? I mean, Piper, you've brought up such a really good point, and I think as so many good points, honestly, as readers, though, everyone, just keep this in mind, and where you are able to push back, because authors can't do this lift alone, especially indie authors need a lot of support from the reader community, and dollars are what motivate these large businesses at the end of the day.
I know I'm personally looking far ahead, and so I'm working to make my indie titles available for purchase digitally direct from my website.
Mm.
I know other authors also have this available. Gail Carriger, one of our mutual friends,
Right.
definitely does. And so, because of that, you'll see in the very near future, before the end of the year, that you'll be able to buy any of my indie titles digitally direct from my website, because it's very possible that
Yeah.
it could take offline. So if you want to support an indie author, and indie is honestly where you will find what the mainstream and the traditional publishers claim nobody wants. That's
Right.
where you will find the best queer romance. That is where you will find the best genre crossing shenanigans, quite
Right, the
honestly.
best sort of blending. Well, and
Oh, yeah.
also I think that indie is often where you see what is coming. So the mainstream big
Indie moves
publishers might.
faster. We're able
Right,
to adjust faster. A traditional publishing house is a bit like trying to turn the or stop the Titanic. It's a very
right.
large beast and it's got a lot of business process in place and a lot of red tape. And so they're not able to adjust for the expressed um things. I do see some questions here I think we should
Yes.
answer.
So
Um
I pulled up one, and I know there's some interest because a lot of us here are steampunks. So Bill would like to know: is your steampunk fiction indie self-published?
It is indeed, and some of it is out of print. I early on wrote a couple of short stories for a universe by T. Morris and Pip Ballantyne called
Hmm.
The Ministry of Peculiar Occurrences. And I think that was probably one of the first entrances to the steampunk stage that my writing took. So those two short stories I think are out of print. But I did write very cute little Christmas vignette called Evie's Gift, which is to date my family's favorite of my stories. It's very, very innocent. It's very low spice level, and it's a short story, but it has, you know, all of the hallmarks that I love about steampunk, in the fact that we have a bit of the punk aspect where we have a main character who is stretching outside of the role that
Yes.
society dictates for them. We do have quite a lot of gadgetry, including
Mm.
a very, very feisty little sugar glider. For anyone who's familiar with the Australian flying squirrel sugar gliders, I had one in college. That I kept with me throughout my college years. And so I created a steampunk gadget one that is synced with the heroine's biometrics, and so reacts to her moods and everything. And he's very helpful. And so that is a fun, quick story. And then I
Mm.
have a much spicier novella called Keeping Cadence, in which we have much more of a kick-ass, badass heroine, um, who is disabled in the fact that I don't know. It's one of those things where she has prosthetic legs, but I don't consider her disabled. She's quite able-bodied, actually, with the help of her prosthetic legs, and she is a part of a sort of a steamship pirate crew and
Yes.
interacts on a bit of an adventure. Um, and so that is a really fun adventure. I haven't had the opportunity to write that much more steampunk. I was the one of the co-authors for a steampunk RPG called the Ministry Initiative, which was set in the Ministry um, of Peculiar Occurrences universe. And so I also did my stint as contributing to tabletop RPG, because I
And
do enjoy playing RPG. I think my favorites are World of Darkness and D&D, but writing for Fate Core, it was the Fate Core system for the TTRPG for the Ministry Initiative, was a lot of fun too for steampunk.
yes, and you all can find links and information about this on Piper's website. Also, to Piper's live Let's Play Vampire the Masquerade game on YouTube.
Yes, the chaotic narrative. We did post quite a few episodes of the Vampire the Masquerade game, Antarai, which in
Mm,
Thai means danger, Antalai.
mm.
There is a question from Sir
Yes,
Bill Bodden, I'm
yes.
comfortable supporting Amazon, which I absolutely respect. I will have all of my indie titles available for sale direct from my website by the end of the year. I apologize that it's not ready yet, but I have been balancing the needs of turning in a manuscript along with adjusting for providing those sales. And so you'll be able to find those steampunk titles up by the end of the year. And you can follow my newsletter if you would like to subscribe to my newsletter, and I'll be making
Yes.
those announcements as to when they're available,
And
to keep track of
again,
that and keep it on your radar.
you can find Piper's newsletter on the website and sign
Thank you.
up. And it's delightful.
There's a lot of
I'm
bonus content I give my newsletter subscribers as well. A few small vignettes. For example, Wings Once Cursed and Bound, you said you are really interested in Pirapan, who is the heroine, who is also a Kinari, or a Thai
yeah.
bird princess, shall we say. So bonus content for my newsletter subscribers is actually the retelling of Minora, the bird princess, in my own words, of
Ah,
the myth that inspired the creation of the character Pirapan. The way that I was told it when I was a child growing up. So it was an oral tradition, and I had to
mm,
kind of recapture it in my own words when I was telling it. So I included the menorah story as bonus content for my
mm,
readers,
mm.
and also a small vignette short story of a trip to Wat Prakau by Pirapan or Punch, and Bennett, our vampire, as she goes to Wat Prakau. Because if you walk in Thailand, in the um, Imperial Palace and Old Temple of Wat Prakau in Bangkok, there is a mural of the Ramakian depicted
Mm.
all the way around the inner walls. And you can find Kinari there, as well as other mythological beings as a part of the Ramakian, as side players or side characters or witnesses to events that happen in major parts of the Ramakian. And so it's a lot of fun to chat about. So I did write a vignette
Yes.
exploring that. And so a lot of bonus content if you
Oof.
check out my newsletter as well.
And it's a great newsletter. It's a great
Also,
newsletter,
since you love
everyone.
the True Hero series, I'm not sure if you saw, but there is a Christmas short story from the True Hero series. We have a breeder who shows up at the kennels, the Hopes Crossing kennels, and asks, "Who's the puppy daddy? One of your dogs knocked up my female German Shepherd dog. So who's the puppy daddy?" And so there's a holiday short story in which they're trying to figure out before Christmas who the puppy daddy is.
That's wonderful.
Probably the only
Honestly.
time in the True Hero series where one of the dogs got it on. But yes, we're trying to figure out who the puppy daddy is in that short story. And it is available to readers who loved my romantic suspense True Hero series and wanted
Oh
a
my
Christmas
goodness.
read.
I love that. No, I shall have to cue that up for my holiday reads, as I love to do that in the holiday season. But I want to get back to some of this discussion about Mythwoven and the Thai mythology that you've brought into it as part of your storytelling. One of my Patreon subscribers specifically wanted to know more about your decision of adding in your own familial mythology and pulling from that to add to the story. And let me see, I'm going to pull up. She also wanted to know what inspired you to include that, mythology into this narrative, and other mythologies that you pull from. And I am excited about this question because you pull from a lot of mythology in these books, not just Thai, but the first book is really inspired by this Thai mythology. And then the second book you're pulling from Korean and Japanese, and you've also got European and all sorts of different mythologies
Egyptian
are
too,
pulled.
yeah.
Egyptian, yes, Egyptian. How could I forget, given everything? But let's talk a little bit about bringing that Thai mythology into the first book and your connection with that.
Well, we have briefly spoken about my origins as a science fiction and fantasy reader at first. I didn't start reading romance until around 2008. I happened to be at a Japanese anime convention here in the Seattle area. I
Oh,
did not live in Seattle yet. It's SakuraCon for those who are
oh
familiar with the
yes.
area. So I was at SakuraCon with friends in 2008, and I perhaps had stayed in the viewing rooms a bit too late because for those of you who have been attending anime conventions for a long, long time, they used to have viewing rooms with all the fan subs in it. And I used to
Mm.
be friends with quite a lot of the fan subbers back in the day when we were fan subbing on VHS tapes, Evangelion and Ranma One Half and all of those fun ones, right? Urusei Yatsura and Oh My Goddess. Um, and so when you would go to the anime conventions, you would watch fan subs because they
Mm.
just weren't available in the US yet.
Yeah.
And I may have been up in the viewing rooms a bit too late. And I may have eaten way too many fried pickles. And so I wasn't feeling very well that morning. And so my companions had gone to the con without me
Oh,
because, priorities, they have
oh,
signings to get to, right?
yes.
Um,
Yes.
absolutely. And no hard feelings. But my friend had left a book on the bed, and I thought it was fantasy. It was titled Lord of the Fading Lands. Cover looked fantasy to me.
Oh,
And
I've read that book.
friends, let me tell you, if you ever needed a portal or a gateway to fantasy romance, Lord of the Fading Lands, in the prologue alone, we meet a hero whose love is murdered on the battlefield right in front of him. And he goes mad and he scorches the world. We're not talking about figuratively set the world on fire. He set the world on fire. Centuries later, his soul lets him know that the actual soulmate of his destiny is somewhere nearby. And he's like, nope, no, I fell in love once before. I'm not
Mm-mm,
over it yet. Too soon.
mm-mm,
Mm-mm.
mm.
And we go on this mystical adventure with it's a well-built world, and that's by
Yeah.
C.L. Wilson. So Lord of the Fading Land by C.L. Wilson, 2008, trapped Piper and sucked her in and hooked her into romance like nobody's business, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was also an avid reader of Patricia Briggs, and we mentioned Patty's fantasy stories like
Yes. Yes.
Hurog and the Ravens, Shadow Raven Strike duology,
Yes.
Steal the Dragon, and When
Ah,
Demons Walk.
yeah.
Ah,
And Hobbs'
you know,
choice.
and the Hobbs Bargain.
Yes, Hobbs bargain.
Oh my gosh,
So
right?
good.
Oh my gosh. And but she was later very similar to me being asked to write romantic suspense and then
Mm,
asked to write urban fantasy. She was asked to switch to urban fantasy, and she created the Mercy Thompson series.
mm,
And that hooked me. Now, the Mercy Thompson series really set the stage for what I think of as it's iconic in the fact that it
yes.
introduces werewolves and vampires and fae as the
Uh,
major players
oh,
in addition to humans. And some of you may have read Laurel K. Hamilton. And
yes.
Laurel K. Hamilton definitely was a genre defining series, her Anita Blake series, right?
Yes.
You would go to the bookstores and they didn't know where to shelve it. Sometimes it would be in fantasy, sometimes it would be in horror, sometimes it would be in romance. Nobody knew where to shelve this. So you would just look everywhere to try to find the Anita Blake series. Um, and oh boy, talk about saucy. That got saucy.
Oh,
Um,
those got so
very saucy.
saucy.
Laurel K. Hamilton, very, very saucy.
Yeah.
Progressively so. And
Mhm.
very much into polyamory, very much into perhaps elements of kink lifestyle and BDSM. It depends on
Yeah.
your flavors. Whereas Patty Briggs took Mercy Thompson in a direction that is much more, I would say, lower spice,
Yes.
bit more
Yes.
in the politics, lower
Mhm.
spice, definitely shenanigans, and lighter
Y-
storytelling. Like
Yes.
it's still there was still a lot of drama, but it was a lighter experience. And then she spun off with a much more romantic element spin-off of that series called the Alpha and Omega series, which
With
fantastic.
Charles and
Mwah.
Anna. So good. They're
But
so
again, still werewolves and vampires and fae, right? And then we started seeing across romance a lot of retellings of fairy tales,
yes.
but they were almost all European fairy tales. A lot of Cinderella, right? And then we
Mhm.
have Sarah
Mhm.
J. Maas who came out, and I know a lot of reviewers like, oh, this is Beauty and the Beast. No, no, friends, the hero's name is Tamlin. How does anybody who attends a Ren fair not know about the Ballad of Tamlin?
Right.
Friends, this is definitely a
Yes.
Tamlin story.
Yes.
And so I was like, okay, we need more mythology. I've
Mhm.
always loved mythology. Sure, sure. Yeah, we have a lot of Greek and Roman mythology. A lot of Greek mythology is super, super popular. We're seeing a
Mhm.
lot of that. I I hunger. I crave mythology from other places. And by
Yes.
the way, I grew up listening to Thai mythology, and that is so underrepresented. And
Mm.
so when I dove into the Mythwoven series, I decided my main character was going to be a mythological creature that most people had not, a mythological being. Like some might consider her a creature. Someone tries to collect her, like a zoo creature. And
Ah,
we have that juxtaposition of like, these are beings, right? These are
right.
people beings, these are sentient. Um, and I wanted to represent that. I wanted also, and this is a big thing. I wrote a blog post for John Scalzi's The Big Idea
Mm.
about Wings Once Cursed and Bound and the diaspora experience. When you are someone whose past, perhaps past generations separated from where your bloodlines came from,
Mhm.
and you grew up someplace else, and now you
Yes.
don't belong in either one. And honestly, you may not have generational knowledge,
Mm.
right? Like what other people grew up with, particularly the children of immigrants. Those immigrants made a decision to leave behind and blend into where they've gone now. And so sometimes there was a conscious decision not to forward the language, not to forward the mythology, not to forward the folk tales or other things that someone who grew up, uh,
Yeah.
you know, at the time or in the same place as your parents or your grandparents did would know just because they know. Like everybody knows
Right.
that story or everybody knows that nursery rhyme, right? And so the diaspora experience is very much something that I wanted for Wings Once Cursed and Bound, where Pirapan or Punch is Thai American. And she realizes somehow, some way she has inherited the gene where she is a Kinari and no one can tell her to be what she is. So she's exploring her powers and what she can do organically.
Yeah.
And this is kind of fun because I had a lot of fun with it. I've been in 2 different tabletop RPGs where the GMs decided to do this, and they don't know each other, so they did it independently.
Yeah.
But one of them, really fantastic GM, we were playing, I think, was it Rollmaster? Either way, it was a campaign in which we were, oh no, it was Champions. The game system was Champions, and it was a thing where the story was that a meteorite had hit the Earth, and so various people, their blood had turned blue because of the
Mm,
changing of the
mm,
hemoglobin in their blood plasma. And what was happening was we were starting to experience powers, and so he had created power packs for people. We didn't create them; he created them, and
oh,
then as we were placed in moments of extreme danger or extreme emotion, we would roll a die and a random power would express itself. And we would have to just keep experiencing things to find out what our power packs were because our powers were expressing themselves randomly and we never knew what they were. So we would just
mm,
take notes when it would happen to us. And so that experience very much colored the idea of Pirapun exploring what she could do, trying to figure out what she could do. And so she doesn't know how to be a Kinari. She just knows she is one.
mm.
She just knows that sometimes wings show up and she's not absolutely sure she knows how
Oh,
to fly.
no. No, she has a wonderful moment in the book where she talks about how the way she even knew about the Kinori was because of doing traditional dance and learning the dance and learning the mythology that way, because there hadn't been
Yeah, the
this.
story wasn't written
Right.
down, right?
It's so beautifully handled,
Thank
and
you.
I love the way in which you've incorporated not only your familial mythology, your lived experience as a person who's part of the diaspora, but also you do this thing with food. And I promised everyone we were going to talk about food, and somehow we haven't, which is wild because we both love good
It was
food.
it was inevitable though.
Right. Our dear friend, Gail, who brought us together, loves good food. Whenever we get together, we're eating and we're enjoying food. And you do that in your books, like in all of your books,
I
actually.
use
There's
food
a
as
lot of wonderful.
characterization. You learn
Yeah.
a lot about characters by the foods that they love, the childhood memories that foods bring to them, as well as people's reactions to food if they're unfamiliar with it. And I think a lot of that has to do with like, I very much love food. Food brings me joy. Sharing food brings me joy. Exploring food brings me joy. And also, I'm a person for whom cooking brings a lot of peace, a lot of calm. Or if I'm thinking really hard about something, I enjoy cooking to allow my brain to percolate on that, right?
Mm,
So I'm much more constructive working out or processing things that are upsetting me or things that I have to plan, deeply complex things, if I cook to keep my hands busy. Wow.
yeah.
And in fact, before our interview, to deal with the anxiety of being an interview, I made milk mochi and dango mochi. The dango mochi actually has silken tofu
Oh,
mixed into it, and then milk mochi is made with mochiko, glutinous rice flour and milk. And so I made these, and I made myself some milk tea to have because you had said bring the tea and snacks.
bring
Um,
the tea and snacks.
and I like to
Absolutely.
incorporate food in my books because it tells you a lot about who the character is, how they enjoy. Are they a super taster? Do they explore the world and never ever use their nose? Right.
Yes.
There was a thread on Threads yesterday when another author was like, "How would you describe the taste of chamomile with bergamot tea?" And I was like, first of all, is it actually tea or is it a tisane? Because that tells me a lot, right? Do you
Yes.
know the difference between tea and tisane?
Yes. Mm.
Um, and also I was like, I noticed that everybody is who's suggesting it is just saying, "Oh, well, it's herby. Oh, well, it's minty." First of all, chamomile, minty?
Yep.
I'd be interested in your palate that you conflate the floral aspect of chamomile with minty, unless it's a blend and the
Right.
minty maybe came from something else. Um, And I was like, what about the olfactory experience? Because when you're drinking hot tea, one of the first things, and honestly, when I eat any food, there's always this intake of breath that you
Mm,
take before you take a bite. You
mm,
always go, right? And
mm.
so, what did
Right.
it smell like? What
Right.
did the food smell like? What did the tea smell like? And if you have
Mm.
bergamot, you're going to get a warm citrusy moment in your olfactory
Oh,
before you
yes.
sip the tea. And then you're going to get the chamomile floral aspect. Some people get like a dried apple taste
Mm,
notes to it. I'm not necessarily that sophisticated in my palate myself, but I do get like kind of a lightly sweet mouthfeel. And then the back end for me is always very bitter. Like just as I'm about to swallow, I'm like, oh, that tea got a touch bitter, right? And that's
yeah.
chamomile for me. I'm
Yeah.
not a super fan of chamomile personally.
No,
Um,
I love chamomile for people, and I'm happy for everyone who likes it. But I taste dry, sort of over baked grass anytime I'm doing
yeah, you get the
chamomile.
grassy, like the very dry, grassy kind of
Right.
experience.
And I'm
Yeah.
just, oh, this is not what I want from my life. I don't like grass that much.
Right, like, and I don't mind a grassy flavor in green teas. There are some
Mm,
very, very young green teas, in
mm,
particular, 1 or 2, that I really enjoy with when I make homemade poke,
mm,
right? Because
mm. Oh,
I live in Seattle. It's actually quite easy to get sushi grade salmon here, and it's also you can get quite a few different kinds of salmon here. Um, coho salmon, king salmon, Copper River salmon. Right. And so I like to
all
get
of
it
it.
sushi grade. I like to cut it up into poke because I'm not that skilled at slicing to present a
Mm,
beautiful plate of sashimi. Um, so I'll make poke and I'll have some fresh steamed rice, sushi
mm,
rice with
mm.
poke on top, and then I will brew this type of very young, delicate green tea. And what you do is you pour the green tea actually over your poke to add to this experience in a bit of an almost soft boiled rice kind of experience, which I really love from Thai. And then I think it's called ochizuke style. And then you can actually eat the green tea leaves because they're so tender. And
Ooh,
that's where that particular tea drinking experience is a bit grassy, but in the combination of that dish, it's a really lovely experience. And
oh,
again, you can talk about that and you can learn about a character
yes.
if they like it that way, and also if another character doesn't, right?
Yes.
I see
Yes.
that there's quite a few people who are like, nope to the bergamot and chamomile,
No, no.
right? I'm
But
not a
no, I
chamomile
love
person
this.
myself, and I had seen this on threads, and I was like, oh, I have opinions, but like you didn't ask me if I like it or not, so I'm not going to answer that because you didn't ask. So I'm not going to bust your thread with that, but I will say, like, hey, why not describe the experience this way? And
Right. Well,
through
especially as you
elements,
say with tea. With
yeah,
tea, especially food that's warm. Absolutely. I find all food has an aroma, but
it can
tea.
really excite the appetite. And if someone doesn't want to eat, let's say they're not
Mm,
feeling well, what is the thing that a person defaults to when they're not feeling well? Comfort
yeah.
food. What is the
Yes.
comfort food from their childhood, right? Like one character when they're sick might want chicken noodle soup. Another character when they're sick, like me, might want kautom, right? Which is soft boiled rice. My dad would also make the soft boiled rice in one pot, and then he would take ground pork and make it into little meatballs and saute it with garlic and ginger because garlic and ginger are very good for your digestive system,
Yes.
and then pour hot water over that to make a bit of a clear soup, and
Mm.
then pour that over the soft boiled rice to give to me. And that was my version of chicken noodle soup. It's like, this is my comfort food. But now you learn something about me as a young person and where I came from. And this is what I grew up with, my comfort food. Um, and my dad would never ever say, I hope you feel better. Daddy's very gruff, bad with words. He'd never say I love you. He never said I'm sorry. But he never said I'm proud of you. And some people are like, oh, I'm so sorry. That seems a shame. I'm like, no, 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 you don't understand. It's not that he didn't express it. If I did,
Totally.
if I had a moment of scholastic excellence, if I had a moment of athletic excellence, that night, my favorite dinner was on the table.
Mm.
If my dad and I had a fight late that night, a snack would be by my door. That's one of my favorite midnight snacks,
Oh.
right? Like, let it not be said that I wasn't shown love. It just wasn't the kind of love that perhaps other cultures are expecting.
I'm tearing up. That's so lovely.
Oh,
It's
yeah, and
really
especially since my
it's
dad,
very
like,
charming. Yeah.
culturally speaking, Thai men aren't necessarily the cooks in the world. So the fact that my
Oh,
dad cooked for me,
oh,
my mom is an amazing cook. Piper mommy's a fantastic cook. You don't
uh,
understand. So it's not
yeah.
even like, daddy
I've
had to
heard
cook because mommy
tales.
couldn't. No, no, no.
Yeah.
Mom was a very, very competent, fantastic cook. But if daddy wanted to show me something, he cooked it for me himself. And daddy never cooks.
Oh,
And he's
oh,
actually quite good.
oh.
Okay, yeah,
But
the poke with green tea, please do try it. It's a really fun thing. You can find quite a few online TikToks and YouTubes on how to do it and do it nicely.
yes. Oh,
Um, I
it
enjoy
sounds
it.
so good.
It's
Um,
light.
but everything you've described, now I'm hungry. Although I do have tea, drinking a
Now,
nice Assam.
I
Your
admit that the dango are usually served on like a little stick, so you can have like the green, the white, and the pink all on the same stick, but I didn't
oh,
have them. So I just have these little bento
that's
forks.
still, I love that. It's cheers. It's so good. Also, I love that you're having milk tea. I was a bit of a hard sell on milk tea originally. I
Mm,
think I had them too sweet
mm.
initially, and I'm like a medium or low sweet in my things.
I'm also
And
a medium or low sweet. I think you'll
yeah,
find milk tea is much sweeter in the US.
mm,
Mm. I prefer
yeah,
Japanese sweets actually over US sweets quite often because Japanese sweets are at the sweet level that I prefer, which is less
yeah,
sweet.
yeah.
I used to work for a Japanese-owned pharmaceutical company in my day job, and so I had to go to Japan quite a few times,
Oh,
which was a
that's so
delight because
terrible for you.
growing up, I loved anime, so now I get to go work for a Japanese company,
What?
go to Japan, experience firsthand various aspects, and my coworkers would really were kind enough to take me to try quite a lot of different foods.
Mm,
And I had a
mm,
particularly good friend. She herself had grown up in Japan, gone to college here in the US in Colorado, met her fiance there.
mm.
And um ended up we met at this company, and she ended up having two young boys while we knew each other, and then she had gone back to Japan based on her career. Like that's
Mm.
what so whenever I'm in Japan, I still meet up with her. And it's so funny because the most recent time that we met up with each other was actually a couple of years ago, right before the pandemic locked us down. And she brought her older son to lunch to meet me. And she goes, "Look, this is the age of our friendship." He's an 18-year-old boy. This is the age of our friendship. And, and the two of us, and it was funny because speaking of food, I had a huge duffel bag because I had brought for her what she could not get in Japan herself, which was fresh boxes of Lucky Charms, not stale, fresh. And I had them
Fresh.
in a duffel bag like I was giving her drugs under the table. And her son opened it up, was like, oh, and she's like, no, no, you're 18. Go get your own. These are for me. This is for mom. Mom's friend brought them from the US for me. These are mine. I'm not sharing.
It's so funny the things that become those treasured foods when you are no longer able to get them at home. And
And what did you learn about our personalities from that interchange, right?
right.
Food and characterization is so much
Mm,
fun because you get to show a lot of things about a character that you don't say on the page, right?
yeah.
And so I love using food and characterization, and I also just love food. Um, so
Well,
yes, that happens a lot in my series. You'll find in Fang So Bright and Deadly, we do crack the K-drama joke about, instead of in the US, someone will say, "Hey, do you want to go back to my place to watch Netflix and chill?" And we know that that's not an invitation to actually watch Netflix, right?
no,
In
no.
K-dramas, it's, "Would you like to come back to my place and eat ramen?" And so we do crack the joke about the ramen in Fang So Bright and Deadly.
No, it's so wonderful. And by the way, everyone, do not read these books whilst you're hungry. It's not
Definitely have snacks. Pack the snacks. Always
right.
pack the
Bring the
snacks.
snacks. I There were a few meals in the first one with Pirapan and the whole crew, especially because the way you used the shared food and the production of food to sort of illuminate these secondary characters that we wouldn't have as much time with. Every meal was so delicious. And I was just like, oh, no, I want jollof fries. What?
Right, the jollof rice. I will confess, I've been watching the Great British Bake Off quite a lot, and
Mm,
Selassie, I forget what
oh,
season he's in, but Selassie was definitely an inspiration. And that's why
yeah.
jollof rice came up. Because at the time, Selassie was actually on Instagram and on various places posting videos of cooking food, including jollof rice. And I was like, oh, that looks good.
So good. I love
Ah,
that so much. No, so do not come hungry. Do not read these books without like a nice little plate of snacks, because you never know until you've read it where the meal breaks are going to come, but they are delicious.
and we also
So
talk a
good.
bit about what people can eat versus not. So, for
Yeah.
example, in Fang So Bright and Deadly, we also talk about how gumiho don't eat chicken, right?
Yeah.
And that may or may not, like your mileage may vary with various people and their representations of
Mm,
gumiho.
mm.
But I had kind of fun with that because there is a popular K drama on TV. I watch it on Viki because I like the translations on Viki better as a streaming
Oh,
service, but it might be available on Netflix. I'm not sure. But it's called My Roommate is a Gumiho. And they're so gumiho are a fox spirit, a nine-tailed fox, very
mm,
similar to
mm, mm.
kitsune, but they have a fox speed. And how they draw life force is they put the fox speed into the host of a human and they absorb that human's life essence, right? And now there's really great mythology around what happens in that case. But one of the things about it is that in My Roommate is a Gumiho, the K drama, while she has the fox speed in her, she's actually quite weak to certain things, like consuming chicken and being around people that are the year of the tiger, because the tiger is the enemy to the fox. And so she has to give up fried chicken. And this is devastating to her because she loves to eat fried chicken.
Oh,
And so it becomes a thing in the story, right? Like, so in Fang So Bright and Deadly, they're talking about making ramen noodles, and they're like, you know what? I don't know how much real chicken is in there, but let's not make chicken ramen. So no chicken for the gumiho. No
no
chicken for
chicken
the
for the gummy.
gumiho. For various reasons, and I do go into some of the historical theories as to why chicken for gumiho is not a good idea.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, again, talking about foods, but also Marie, who's our witch, is very much a blend of backgrounds, Chinese
Mm,
and Korean, I believe, and also and white and
mm,
Caucasian background because she's
mm,
multiple generations removed and
mm.
mixed, right? But she's also a very natural witch. And so a lot of her magic is quite subtle. And you'll find that she puts together herbal teas to make people feel better. And she does create intention and imbue them with a little whisper of her magic to make the herbs more effective than their already natural effect. And
It's so
so you may get some hints if you happen to be up on Chinese medicine or Korean medicine. A very common across many different Asian cultures is the idea of ginger being warming and good for
mm,
digestion.
mhm.
Jujubes, not the candy, not the US candy, but they're actually these jujube berries. They're a type of like almost date. And goji berries,
Mm.
ginseng obviously is a very popular one that a lot of people know. So you'll find that some of this comes into play, and she is very much that kind of natural witch who grows a lot of plants in all of her spaces, in any of her spaces. And there's a whisper of amplifying the impact or the
Yeah,
medicinal effect,
yeah.
and based on the intent of her magic naturally. And it's a very subtle thing, but you'll find that in the food as well. And just the idea of entering an Asian home, right? Uh, I'm very much a person who likes to just normalize the idea that there's a shoe rack by the door and you take off your shoes going into the door.
Yes. Well, and you have a lovely, not to give any spoilers, anyone who hasn't read the book yet, you can't have read it. It's not out yet, but it's coming soon. There's this
September
moment.
24th, pre-order it.
5 weeks. You have 5 weeks. Yeah,
Yeah,
then
you have 5
pre-order
weeks to
it.
read Wings Once Cursed and Bound if you're the type of person who likes to start at the first.
And it's so good. Read it.
And the
Listen to it. The
audiobook is good.
audiobook's so good.
Cindy Kay is the voice actor. Shout out to Cindy Kay. And
Yeah,
she is the voice actor who's been chosen to do Fang So Bright and Deadly as well. So there will be
it's
consistency in voice acting.
wonderful. It's wonderful. But there's a moment in which they come back, and I can't remember if it's Kuru or Joe, who's like, oh, and now I have my own slippers, not the disposable slippers, but the padded slippers that are just for me. And it's like such a lovely little detail and such a lovely moment in the story. And it made me
When you
feel
get
like,
your own house slippers, you belong to the household.
yeah,
That's the
it's
love
really nice.
language.
It's so lovely. So, by the by, this is everyone's chance. If you have any questions, please cue them up in the comments. Please take Gail Carragher's wonderful method and put a question mark at the beginning of your question to help me see it. But also note that at the end of the books, Piper has notes about the mythology and some of the mythical items, and they're wonderful. Listen, you don't have to have the notes. You can read the book without the notes. But I love mythology, so I was very excited that there was like little indices in the back where I could read more about all of these mythologies that are included and some of the characters. It's a wonderful primer on some of this. Yeah,
Oh,
please.
yes, thank you. So, a little insider note for all of you who are interested in Fang So Bright and Deadly. I include a character who's an Itanmomen, which is a Japanese yokai that takes the form of a fabric scroll. But they are a bit shapeshiftery. And the inspiration for that actually came from an anime called Ino X Boku. Secret Service. And Ino X Boku Secret Service anime, there's an Itanmomen who's like a big brother figure in that. And he's so fantastic. How could I not include an Itanmomen in one of my stories? So when you wonder, you had asked me very early on, and we've been kind of wandering through the answer of that, of like, how are you including all of these different mythologies? We're seeing a bunch of people who are like, I blame you all for the dumplings.
I'm so
Yes.
hungry.
All
Yes.
the dumplings. Do all the dumplings. All of the food that you're going to get. If you end up finding yourselves getting Lucky Charms, that's also my fault. I apologize. That is a bit sugary though. So make sure to have some protein to balance out that sugar intake. Which is why my dango are made with silken tofu. Just to give myself a little bit more protein. Not a lot, but you know, just some. But yeah, no, I love Japanese mythology, and I am just learning more and more about Korean mythology, partially because K-dramas do such a great job with Gumiho, right? And I just want to know more and more and more. I love Chinese mythology as well. And speaking of dance, you know, we talked about how Pirapan is a dancer, and learning the traditional Thai dance of Menorah Bushayan, which is menorah into the bonfire. I learned that dance in college, and it was part of this sort of yearly thing that the Asian American Association would put together, which was like what they would call the Mystique of the East. And it was a show that we put on, and different people would do different dances. So I also, because I was a dancer, I would help with other people's presentations. And I learned the Philippine Tinikling. I learned the South Asian Bhangra and Dandia. And so I had learned a lot of these other dances. And there's quite a lot of other dances that, if you look at the mythological or historical background of why they do this folk dance, it's really quite fun. And so mythology has always been an interest of mine. And then I had a heart attack in 2021, which caused me to take a break from my day job for some time. And once I had recovered from, you know, the required bed rest and going through all of the medical follow-up appointments, and it turned out quite good news that I did not have cholesterol or clogged heart disease. It was actually completely stress-induced, my heart attack. I was on the road to recovery and adjusting my dietary and physical capabilities. And And obviously, dietary does not mean that you stop eating things. But you become
Right.
much more aware and conscientious of how much you eat and when you eat them and how you balance your macros. Um, a couple of friends and I, Kay Tempest Bradford, who is a middle grade author, lovely,
Yes.
lovely book. Ruby Finley Against the Interstellar Invaders, like talk about Black girl magic. And then also Alethea Contis, who very much writes fantasy of
Yeah.
various types for various ages, young adult, middle grade, children's books.
Mm.
The three of us went to Egypt together under the auspices of Kay Tempest Bradford, taking us back to some of her favorite places. Those two, listen, I was a heart attack survivor, and those two dragged me through 7 pyramids. Seven pyramids, climbing in and out of these. Our tour guides were on top of us, wondering
Oh,
if I was going to make it.
oh,
There was an 8th period where our tour guides wouldn't even let me go in. They were like, no, just no, you can wait out here. We've gotten you. And they were also super conscientious, right? Like our tour guides realized I also had asthma. So they picked Egyptian eucalyptus fresh off the trees and stuffed them in the van that we were driving around in to help my breathing recovery. So I
oh.
had fresh eucalyptus branches in our van every day because our tour guides were so considerate. And they took us to the greatest places to eat. They very quickly learned, and this is something that you would learn if you travel with Gail Carriger. This is something that you will learn if you travel with me and Gail Carriger at the same time, which happened last October
Yeah.
in Thailand, is that we will eat and we'll put everything in our mouth,
Yeah.
everything, right?
Yes.
We are
Yes.
willing to blow up our digestive tracts. And our poor Egyptian tour guides realized that I was absolutely willing to blow up my digestive tract in the name of experiencing a food. Like there was this fantastic thin sliced eggplant that had been lightly fried. And then on top of it was almost a ceviche of of vinegary, acidic, bright lemon juiced, diced fine minced vegetables and fish over this eggplant. And they're like, that might be not so good for your stomach. Oh, she ate it. And I'm like, I ate the whole plate. That was gorgeous. It was my favorite bite of the entire Egyptian trip. And did I blow up my digestive tract? Absolutely. Yes, I did. I found out that Egyptians have this medication that is labeled as mummy tummy. I did look
Mummy
up the
coming.
yes, it's called mummy tummy. It's actually quite effective. It is not available in the US. I did look up the actual molecule because I my day job is in life sciences, regulatory consulting for pharmaceutical research and development. So I know quite a lot about drug development. And so I did track down the drug to find out what it was and report it back appropriately to my primary care physician just to be a responsible adult. Right. But mummy tummy is quite effective for like travelers runs, especially if you blow up your digestive tract. Um, but
Oh,
oh yeah, like I no less than 3 times in 3 weeks did I blow up my digestive tract, deciding to eat something random that my tour guides were like, that could be, was it worth it?
oh,
I'm like, it was worth it. It was so
it's
worth it.
so good. Oh my gosh. I love your sort of I don't want to say bravery, but your boldness when it comes to I am going to taste every element and enjoy this feast of
It's a joie
life
de
when I
vivre.
travel.
It's joie
It's
de vivre.
wonderful. So we
Jacqueline
have
Perry and her joie is also
yeah.
something that I love.
Oh my gosh.
Ugh.
Yeah, no, and the two of you together eating is always delightful. I have to be very careful what I eat because I permanently blew up my digestive system, but
Mm.
I get a lot of joy from watching the two of you try everything. So,
So many things. Yes,
so
Thailand
good.
is a fantastic thing. We do have some questions. Do we want
We
to?
do. So we've got this wonderful question from Bill. When you have your website ready to sell direct, will there also be a print on demand option for people who prefer to read physical books as opposed to ebooks?
For the longer omnibuses, yes. Um, the longer omnibuses would be the Triton Experiment series, which has 3 novellas and one heavy boy, one chunky boy, and also the London Shifters series, which is
Mm.
we haven't spoken about it yet. It is a paranormal romance in which we have werewolves protecting humans at ground zero of the zombie apocalypse. For those of you who happen to do work in life sciences, this was written in the 2012 to 2014 time range, not the recent pandemic. But we do have clinical trial discussions, and the development of a preventative vaccine and the importance that a vaccine only works in advance, not as a cure. And they need to actually find a cure for a
Yeah.
particular virus.
Mm.
And so that does become rather pivotal within the series. But
Mm.
it is a set of 3 novellas that is very much shapeshifters versus zombies.
Mm.
And we have humans as the love interests there, or other shapeshifters, depending. The second book, we have a half banshee, half human berserker, who is a love interest, and she's does quite the damage in the London Underground, by the way.
Ooh. Ooh.
It's quite the thing. And so we also have a bunch, three small side characters who discuss the dangers of trying to find mushy peas and liking mushy peas when you're dumpster diving. Is it
Oh
mushy
no.
peas or is it not? We don't know.
Yeah.
So that's a running joke because my partner Matthew J. Drake had never had mushy peas at the time that I was writing it, and so I told him that if we should ever get into a competition about something, I'll bet the penalty game for him would be to eat mushy peas, which isn't that much of a penalty. I like mushy peas, by the way. Well done mushy peas are quite nice.
They have their place. They have a moment. They're
Yes,
delightful.
if they're done nicely. The next question is favorite daifuku filling. Good
Yes.
question. So
Thank you, Deborah.
my favorite daifuku filling is actually only obtainable during Cherry Blossom Festival because I like white bean sakura on. And so what it is it's daifuku, and they use white azuki bean that has been infused with sakura petals or cherry blossom petals.
Mm.
So
Mm.
that is my favorite
Mm.
daifuku filling. It's very hard to find. Most of the time when you look up, you'll find red bean or strawberry filling.
Yeah.
And that is not what I'm talking about. This is a white bean filling that has been processed to be very, very smooth. And then
Mm.
it's mixed with preserved sakura blossoms or cherry blossoms. Um, that's my
Sounds
favorite
good.
daifuku filling. My second favorite is easier to find, but still usually only at very, very special wagashi or Japanese confectionery places. And this is white bean on again. And
Mm.
it's wrapped around a candied kumquat and then wrapped in a daifuku, in mochi filling to make a
Oh.
daifuku.
Oh.
Those two are my two favorite daifuku fillings.
Oh.
One is almost impossible to find, and one is more likely to find. Oh no, Matthew J. Drake just hit the chat and says he's not a fan of mushy peas.
No, thank you. No, thank you for this
Still
mushy
effective as a
pea.
penalty game.
So Bill would like to know who your favorite authors and books are, and
Oh my goodness.
you've done a great job of talking about a lot of authors and different books
Oh,
during
but
this
so
chat.
too reads.
But
I'm happy to answer.
yeah.
Okay, so I will say if we're talking traditional old school sci-fi, we're talking old school sci-fi. So my favorite rereads are The Elfstones of Shannara, although
Oh.
that love triangle, I have problems. You do not fridge the heroine by turning her into a tree. What the heck? So slightly problematic, but the story is still really impactful and an old favorite. So Terry Brooks also has a series called Magic Kingdom for Sale Sold, which I really enjoyed as a young person. So that has a place in my heart. For space opera, I really love Anne McCaffrey. I understand that she could do a lot better. Like the Brain Chip series has a lot of ableism that we weren't aware of how to write and represent the nuance properly. But The Ship Who Searched is still to date my absolute favorite space opera. And also the Crystal Singer series, ridiculously impactful for me. Ridiculously impactful. Patricia Briggs, obviously, for urban fantasy, although I want to give a shout out to Ilona Andrews for urban fantasy because she has
Yeah.
two series that I love. Kate Daniels, which also does encounter a lot of unusual mythology, less mainstream mythologies that including Egyptian. My particular favorite from the Ilona Andrews books is actually not it's a spin-off from the main Kate Daniels series. It's Gunmetal Magic. And it features Andrea, who is a hyena shifter.
Oh my
And
gosh.
they go up against Egyptian gods. And so that was very well done. Plus, it really is from a romance arc. And I actually teach a class on mastering relationships, and it's called The Friend, the Lover, and the Enemy. And we look at lover relationships, romantic relationships. And I say, you don't have to have the full romantic arc depicted in the book. And one of the fun things about Gunmetal Magic is it actually shows up after the big breakup. Literally the whole book is just, are we going to get back together again or not, right? Which is like the tail end of a multi-beat story beat romance arc. Literally that book is just the end. Like all of the other beats happened in either earlier books in the Kate Daniel series or in short stories, right? But this book, so Gunmetal Magic is a favorite. So I love Iolona Andrews for their Kate Daniel series, for Gunmetal Magic. And also they have a completely unrelated series called the Innkeeper series. And a semi-sentient inn that is bonded with a human innkeeper to the point where the innkeeper, upon meeting you, can create a room that is your heart's desire.
It's so good.
The magic behind that. And she has a shapeshifter werewolf that is like, it incorporates some sci-fi elements to it, which is really kind of fun. So it's fantasy / sci-fi in a really lovely genre blended way. So the Innkeeper series is a lot of fun. It does have a different voice to it because it was originally written serial. So from an author perspective, it's interesting to take a look at the finished product because originally it was written serial for newsletter subscribers or website subscribers, chapter by chapter. And then they did an editing pass on it before they published it as a book. And so it has a different kind of voice to it, right? Than the more lyrical voice. But then again, if we're talking about straight up fantasy, especially saucy fantasy, Jacqueline Carey's Kushiel series. Oh, friends.
Oh my goodness. That series.
I say that I don't like politics, but I will read politics for Jacqueline Carey's Kushiel series because the sheer way that she writes that series and courtesans and political intrigue. OMG. And what I also like is a lot of people have, in retrospect, asked if a side character, Alsween, was ace, or if he was bi, or this and that and those. And she refuses to say, oh, yes, if that just benefits her. She does not, like, what's the term? When you retroactively make a character something that they weren't originally designed to be.
Thing.
That thing, friends. The word that I apparently,
exactly
as an author, cannot find. It's like when you go back and you reimagine, like you say, yes, that character was supposed to be there all the time.
Yes.
Like, yes. I can think of characters, but we shall not discuss, right?
We're not going to name them, but we know who we're talking about. Yeah.
Exactly. I will say that there is a particular author who I do not support or approve of any of the hot takes that she has stated, but I really love what AO3 fandom has done with some of those characters.
Yes, that part is very fun. Thank you, fanfic, for
and I will never officially acknowledge fanfic for reasons that authors must, right? So if I don't know about it, I can't be faced with the decision as to whether or not I have to protect my IP. So please, don't tell me. But do I read fanfic? Yes, I do. I try to stay very limited in my adventures in fanfic, but I have a lot of respect for a lot of it. You learn a lot, and it's really quite interesting.
So I love how much reading overlap we have, and also thank you for shouting out some of these absolutely stunning books.
I'm not even sure I'm done yet, because if we think about it, I haven't really mentioned anybody from contemporary sci-fi.
That's right.
I really haven't. Have I? I mean, contemporary sci-fi, I will say that Kaiju Preservation Society is a favorite with John Scalzi, as well as Android's Dream.
Yes.
I have to say, listening to Will Wheaton as a narrator for John Scalzi is an excellent voice combination, like the narrative voice versus the voice actor's voice. Very, like, really. I really enjoy it. Other sci-fi, I mean, oh gosh. N.K. Jemisin, obviously.
Yeah.
Obviously. Just fantastic. And when it comes to romance writers, I have to say that for historical romance, for those of you who are steampunks but perhaps are willing to try Regency romance. I must admit that I very much love Lisa Kleypas's The Wallflower series because it's a best
Oh,
friend. The entire series is structured around best friends deciding to take their futures in their own hands and help each other get what they want. And each of them falls in love in a
yes.
unique way and finds her way. And yes,
Yeah.
it does, they do end up married, but it's because they want to be, not because
They're
they don't,
wonderful books. They
right?
are wonderful.
So the
Yeah.
Lisa Kleypas series is an absolute favorite. I have to shout out Courtney Milan, who is the person who taught me about tea. Like, she has a great, great tea-centric newsletter. If you do not
Oh,
do anything else, subscribe to her newsletter
it's
because very thoughtful tea
it's
experiences.
so good.
But her, The Duke Who Didn't, and like her series, very, very diverse, beautiful historical romance series. And I love her. I love her writing. Absolutely love it. So definitely a
Absolutely.
favorite author there. Um, oh
Let,
gosh.
can we pause for a moment and just give Courtney Milan a little bit more love? We should give all the authors love, but I I'm sharing Courtney's current,
The Duke
like
Who
this new
Didn't.
series
Yeah.
starting with the Duke Who Didn't. And so I had shared previously with Piper that the reason I read romance novels at all is entirely Courtney Milan's fault. She got me hooked on romance as a genre. She's an amazing author, and the Trials of Wedgford series is just stunning. And I have to second Piper. The newsletter is so good.
Yes.
Courtney truly loves tea.
Yes.
So good.
Courtney is fantastic. I will say Fonda Lee is
Mm,
fantastic for
mm,
fantasy, and not just because of her Jade Wars series, which is what she's most well known for, but because she has a very steampunky
yes.
Aethernaut kind of series or standalone book that The Untethered Skies, I think it's called. Was it The Untethered Skies? Fonda Lee?
I'm looking
Paying
it
for
up
it.
right now.
But
Everyone,
yes, Fonda
the
Lee.
comments are full of great links. So
Yeah, the Jade Force series is excellent, but she also has, because I'm aware that you have quite the steampunk audience. She does
yes.
have one or two titles that would appeal
Yes.
to steampunks for sure.
Oh, here we've
Um,
got it. Yeah.
is it there?
It's
Thank you.
Untethered
It
Skies.
is The
Yeah.
Untethered Skies, yeah. So, I mean, so those are some of my favorite authors, and I do read quite widely, and so, like, there's a book that's coming out that if you like gothic vibes without actually being, um so one of the things that I notice that's actually relatively frustrating for me is when someone assumes that a gothic type of story or fairy tale absolutely must be set in Victorian times with,
Right.
like, dark castles and deep dark, you know,
Yeah.
um, clothing and setting. We're not writing historical fantasy, right? Like, you can have a
Ah,
gothic fantasy
yes.
without
Yes.
having Victorian setting. And Maxim McKay, um, hold on, Maxim M. Martineau
Mm,
has The House of Blight coming out
mm.
in 2025. And friends, I've read early aspects of that draft, and it is beautiful. It is
Ooh,
gothic, it is
ooh.
fantasy. It does have a take on fae that are called Evers, and it has magic, and it has difficult decisions and morally gray characters. And for those of you who appreciate the beauty of a beetle with that gem tone to it,
Mm,
this this story is for you. The
mm.
House of Blight, definitely up for pre-order already. The cover has just been released, and that is such a book that is worth waiting
Ah,
for.
ah.
I that, like, that gothic feeling, and it's just
Oh, I'm so
beautiful
excited. I've
prose.
added it to my TBR. Thank
Yes.
you for the recommendation.
And
Thank
Maxim
you
is
for
actually
all of
somewhat
these.
local to you, my dear friend.
Really?
Yes, she is up in the Phoenix area, Phoenix Scottsdale
Uh,
area.
Oh.
So Maxim
Oh.
is definitely local to you.
Oh.
Just an FYI.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. I shall definitely keep that in mind for the future.
Yes.
By future, I mean probably need to invite this author onto the show in in advance of the book publishing so we can get to know them.
Oh,
So
please do.
yeah, this
She's
is lovely.
fantastic
Thank you,
and
thank you.
lovely.
Thank you, thank you. So I have one more question for you from our Patreon subscribers, and that is, you've written many genres. How do you keep track of your ideas and decide which literary genre they will fit into when you're writing? Or do you just let the story and the characters kind of develop organically?
Honestly, it's a bit like cooking. You recognize that you have elements of fusion. For example, you know, sometimes I'll be cooking a Thai dish and I recognize that there are Chinese elements to that Thai dish. And this is why you'll very rarely hear me use the word authentic, even when I'm posting pictures of my own cooking.
Right.
And I mean, what is authentic? It's such a difficult, nuanced discussion to have. I'm very much about fusion cooking. I must say, if any of you are like to follow cooks on TikTok and Instagram stories, Chef John Kung, fantastic fusion cooking. But that's very much how I approach my writing style, in the fact that I understand that I have elements of fantasy. Elemental genres, Writing Excuses podcast covered for an entire season, elemental genres. So, for example, Fang So Bright and Deadly, I recognize that I was writing a fantasy, like fantasy elements in setting and blending, right? Which makes it different from urban fantasy. Yes, a lot of people could name it urban fantasy because the setting is contemporary Seattle, today, present day Seattle. But there are fantasy setting and fantasy moments that are so clearly what you would experience scene wise in a fantasy novel, that genre is what makes it fantasy romance. And obviously, the romance being the key and central arc is what makes it a romance. And so I recognize that I have those elemental genres in play, but I know each of those genres well enough to make it so that the flavors harmonize. Because sometimes, especially in Thai cooking, we're not trying to get everything to taste to blend, right? In fact, what we're looking for is contrast. So you'll find when you take a bite of a particularly fantastic Thai meal like som tam, which is the papaya salad, when you take a bite, right, you're going to get salty and you're going to get sweet and you're going to get acidic in such a way that it actually like bursts. If it's done properly, it bursts and you can feel it in like the jawbone back here. It's sweet and it's salty and it's bright and there's a bit of spicy heat that keeps it all together. And also from a textural perspective, you've got this umami coming through and you've got this crunch from the papaya, but also the softness from tomatoes and from garlic that's fresh and sharp. You've got, like, especially if you get some thumb in Thailand like I do, one of my favorite ones to get is where you take actually a fresh little black crab and you rip off his little head, like his little top shell. He's very fresh. And he gets pounded in there with it. So you have this umami sweetness from this fresh raw crab beaten into this papaya salad. And then you have the texture of the crunchy peanuts in there as well, and the crunchy string beans that are Chinese long beans rather than just the green beans that you get here in the US, right? And those have a natural sweetness to them. So Thai food is very, very often about balancing sour with sweet, spicy with cool, right? Like all of these different contrasting elements that do this flavor thing in your mouth that makes just blows your mind. That's what I try to do with my genres. Is I'm aware that I'm using certain elemental genre aspects. Heist is sometimes considered a genre, right? Almost all paranormal romance that you read, whether you read Ilona Andrews, whether you read Patricia Briggs, there's always a mystery going on with a paranormal romance or an urban fantasy. Very often there's that suspense element, right? That mystery element, right? And so a lot of people will say, like, look, what's a yes, romance is formulaic, but what is a mystery without a dead body? Like what's a murder mystery without a dead body? So there are certain elements that are just recognizable as that elemental genre aspect, and I use them the same way I use when I'm cooking food. It's like I'm hungry for these flavors. How do I make them dance together in this dish?
I love this analogy and this way of describing the experience. And also, Piper, again, I've read so many of your books.
Thank
I
you.
don't think I've read quite everything. I've read like 75% of your back catalogue. And you do a beautiful job of blending these elements, and you make such a tasty literary snack every time. Thank you very much for that, as one of your fans and a delighted friend as well. Also, thank you for making
Thank
me
you.
extremely hungry during our chat for Thai food. I'm very fortunate that a fantastic little hole in the wall Thai place is a half mile from my house. I'm so
Oh.
grateful for that fact right now, I have to tell you. So, thank you, Charles Ty. That has no idea I'm talking about them. But before we wrap up, everyone, thank you so much for being here. This has been such a wonderful time with Piper. Obviously, I need to have you back.
I
This
would love to come back. Thank you so much for having me.
We've barely scratched the surface. There's so many things to talk about. Problem is, we don't get to see each other often enough. And so I
Not
was just
often
like,
enough, no.
yes, please tell me everything. But I do have my particularly nerdy brand of questions to finish out our chat with. And this is you can tell I read too much French literature at a young age. And so we're going to do my modified Proust questionnaire, questions for you to wrap up. And also, thank you, Deborah. Yes, happy Black Cat Appreciation Day to you.
Mm,
Also, a shout out to the corgi contingent, because I know, Piper, you love a corgi. So,
we do.
yeah. All right. So, my first question for you is, what are your favorite qualities in a human?
Ah,
Or,
favorite
or
qualities in
a
a human.
fox spirit.
Oh, goodness. Favorite qualities in
Woodlord.
a human. You know what? I love people who are full of life.
Mm,
I love gravitating to people who are full of life. Um, I enjoy, and I have many friends and loved ones who are grumpy, who are cheerful. The Japanese would be like Genki, right? Somebody who's
right.
very Genki, bright and charming and happy. But I love people who have nuanced personalities,
Mm,
right? Like they're not only grumpy.
yeah.
Sometimes they got a soft side to them. They're not just morally gray. Sometimes there's a morality chain involved and they have their own set of morals, right? I
Ah,
love people who are honest with themselves as well as honest to people around, even if they're not honest with people
mm,
around them. They're at least honest with themselves. They're
mm,
self-aware.
mm,
I love people who continually try to be better,
mm,
whatever that definition is to
mm,
themselves, right?
mm,
Like they're not stagnant. They're always progressing, they're always evolving. And if that means that that evolution causes an evolution in which we're no longer friends, I respect that.
mm,
But I respect people who evolve far more than I respect people who remain stagnant. I
uh,
like people who can stand toe to toe with me. You don't have to be a confrontational personality, but someone who can stand shoulder to shoulder with me or toe to toe with me in terms of intellectual discussion or physicality or something in such a way where I am not the always the power the powerful one in the power
mm,
dynamic.
mm,
I
mm,
like for balanced friendships and relationships.
mm.
I think that codependency is dangerous, and I try not to do that with people because I feel like I do them an injustice. And so I
Mm,
really like people who can kind of hold their own around me, and I
mm.
try to do them the same in return.
Ah, that's beautiful. Honestly, you hit both of my first two questions in one response, and I love that because the second question is, what do you appreciate most in your friends? And you told me, and it's beautiful. It's
Thank you.
beautiful. All right. So, what is the virtue you strive for the most in yourself?
Oh my goodness. I mean, it's so much more fun to think about the 7 deadly sins and which ones I embrace because goodness, they're so much fun.
Yes.
Virtues. Virtues. I like I personally have a very strong moral compass. I embrace that. I like it about myself. I don't say that my moral compass points the same true north as other people's moral compass, but I have my own moral compass.
Yes. Listen, if Hemingway could do it, you definitely get to. He was a
Exactly.
mess, and you are not a mess.
Oh
So
no, I am a hot, spicy mess, and that's okay.
you're a chaotic bisexual, and I
And
like that
exactly.
about you
It's
very
okay for
much.
us to be messy. It is. It really
Yes.
is. Honestly, if sex isn't messy, well,
Right. What's
perhaps you
the
should try
fun?
that out because it is quite the
Yeah.
fun experience.
I like a bit of a mess too. All right. What is your ideal way to spend an afternoon? If you could
Mm.
do anything anywhere, budget's no limit. You don't have to worry about the day gig. You can do exactly what you want for an afternoon.
Oh, see, I'm such a mood changer. I'm terrible at saying that there's any one way to spend a
Mm.
mood because I am rather chaotic that way. Sometimes I'd like to go out and, go trail hiking or drop a kayak in the water and go paddling out and accidentally make friends with sea lions. That's happened in the past. I've actually had tour guides ask me if I brought sardines with me because he didn't understand why sea lions kept coming up to say hi. And he's like, just do you remember how to bail out in case one of them tries to climb on your kayak? Like, I didn't do it on purpose, friends. I did not have sardines with me. I'm not that kind of stupid. But I do have a bit of a Disney princess vibe going on, and that does mean when you're with me, um, animal encounters are higher
Mm,
likelihood.
mm,
And
mm.
if you remain calm, the animal encounter is a pleasant one. If you freak out, you're gonna get me killed.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
So don't do that.
so I do enjoy going out and experiencing things that way. But I'm not the type of person to stay long, right? Like museums, aquariums, things like that. I am not the person that will stay there for an entire day. I will definitely
Mm.
go through the average aquarium or the average museum in about 2 hours, and then I will be on to food, right?
Yes.
Like what can we
Food.
eat? Um,
Food.
I do explore new places based on the food.
Mm.
So if I'm going to Egypt, if I'm going to Thailand, if I'm going to Japan, if I am going anywhere in the world, it will be a foodie adventure first and foremost as the highest priority,
Love that.
and iconic other experiences next to it, right? And if it's
Love
not
that.
me eating, it's me feeding other things like feeding bananas to elephants. Or did you know in some parts of the world, it's a festival thing, like a matsuri thing or a festival thing, that you can take a bottle of feed and bottle feed koi and carp? It's the most adorable thing I've ever seen in my life. It's incredibly overly priced, but it's really fun. Like, you're not just sprinkling fish food over the water. You can actually take a bottle and bottle feed a fish, and it's so cute,
I desire doing this so much now.
right? You
Oh
really must
no.
come visit me in Thailand because we are going
Yes.
to enter a stage where I will be in Thailand with an established second home. My first home
Mm.
is in the Pacific Northwest area, up in the Seattle area, and my second home will be in Thailand. So I will be in Thailand for portions of the year, and really, you must visit, and we will do
I,
those things.
I
You
would
know,
love to. I would
when
love
Gail
to.
came with me to visit the elephant, she's like, "Can I eat it?" No. Well, then fine. We'll be here. We'll learn the history, and we will move on to something we can go eat, right? But
Yes. Ah,
it was kind of fun to feed bananas, natural bananas, to elephants.
oh,
And it's just so yes, I like to eat, and I also in turn like to feed animals. One thing that you will always find, because I too eat everything. There's very few things in this world that I will not eat. But I have a rule, and my grandmother found this out when I was a very young child. She sent me out to go catch chicken for dinner for chicken curry.
oh yes.
Family knows this only takes me like 5 minutes, and I'd been gone for 15. So they're like, "Where did she go?" And it turned out I had trotted down to the local village market to trade it for a chicken I didn't know, because I had fed this chicken. I had raised this chicken. I had gained this chicken's trust. I am not going to eat it for dinner. It just, there's that moral compass. It's, to me, it's kind of wrong if you have gained their trust. There's just some kind of karma attached to it. So I traded it for a chicken I didn't know so I could kill that chicken for dinner.
I
So,
love this so much that you could only eat the stranger chicken. A
like, I
chicken
need to
unknown
not
to you.
know my dinner, okay, friends? there's a betrayal of trust if you're just going to feed it and then eat it. Like, I understand that that is a farm way for some people, which is why I said my moral compass doesn't necessarily match other people's. Like, I
Oh,
understand from a pragmatic practicality perspective, especially if you grew up and lived on a farm, sometimes you have to do this. But I had
yes.
the privilege and the option to be able to trot down to the village market and trade it for a chicken I didn't know. And so I took that option. I did, for my peace
This
of mind.
delights me. This delights me.
I did
So
not give up my chance to eat chicken, though.
no, you still had chicken curry, but it was a chicken you had never had tea with, and I don't know. That feels very reasonable to me.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You
You're
see, you
welcome.
learn a lot about my personality with those stories.
Well, this is why we ask the weird Proustian questions, because they're strangely illuminating, and also Proust did it first, so why
not?
why not? Right, so okay. What is your idea of happiness?
So many different things can make a person happy, and happy isn't a single feeling, right? Like, you can have very happy, sadly happy, bittersweet happiness. There's so many different types of happy. I don't know if I can give a single definition for happy or a single concept for ideal happiness. I think it is a thing to strive for. I think it is a thing to search for and to acknowledge and celebrate when you are, so that you're
Yes.
not forever looking for it when you have it. Like, celebrate this happiness now in this moment, and also look forward to other types of happiness in the future. Yes, let us do
I love
both.
that. I love that. That's a great answer. So, of course, Piper, as the Grand Arbiter would say, you are perfect and you've never done anything wrong in your life. So, of course, you're giving the best answers to all of my questions today. Thank you very much. So, my final two questions for you are, as a linguist, I love these, to be honest. These are for me.
Uh-oh.
What is your favorite swear?
All right.
And you can use any swear. We try and keep it like PG-13, but this is your chance to say something really naughty.
So I have a quote from Fang So Bright and Deadly that is also indicative of my favorite swear in context, right? Because it has to be the context which makes it delicious. Let me grab that actual quote. Here it is. So this is a quote by Joe, the character, one of the characters in Fang So Bright and Deadly. Sometimes there isn't a better word to express exactly what I mean when the word fuck comes out of my mouth.
Yes.
Yes. So there you have my favorite swear, and in the context of a quote from my favorite character. Like, my favorite quote from this particular character.
Oh, and Joe is delicious. So
Yeah.
the whole book is delicious, but he's wonderful. All right. Last question. As an author, as a person, whether you're writing or not, whether this is just something you like to say, what is your favorite adjective?
Huh? That's a good question. Adjective. That's a very good question. I mean, I think we use delicious quite often. Right? You know what I mean? Because delicious, it expresses delight in a thing in such a wonderful way. To describe something as delicious.
Yeah.
I love that. I think delicious would be it, because I love food and I like to describe it that way. But I also love savoring a feeling. So a feeling can be delicious without actually having anything to do with taste or eating, right? Just savoring the feeling of something can be delicious. Revenge can be delicious.
Oh, yes,
Fight
it
can be
Very
delicious.
satisfying.
I mean, when you're covered in salt, you are so salty about a thing, and then the absolute karma happens, and you get away scot-free because right?
Because
That's just delicious right there. Like, whoever said salt was bad, salt is not bad.
No.
And honestly, just how often we spoke about happiness and the pursuit of happiness. Some people prefer to wallow in an unhappy feeling,
Yeah.
perhaps sadness or anger. And I think that savoring, that simmering anger can be incredibly delicious. I mean, why do we like spicy food, right? Spice
Yeah.
isn't a taste on your tongue. Spice is actually a pain receptor response. We do it to ourselves, those of us who like spicy foods, in a bit of a masochistic way, like sadistic way, right? Like it's a
Yeah.
pain receptor that we're triggering on purpose, and we can't stop because it actually triggers the release of wonderful endorphins inside our head. Spicy food and the intake of it isn't a taste. We're actually inducing pain in ourselves. And so I think that pain and sadness and anger can all be delicious too. And so I think that that might be my favorite adjective at the
Mm.
moment.
Mm. Piper, that is a great adjective. And honestly, I feel like that is a wonderful place to wrap up our conversation. And so thank you for spending this time with us today. And thank you all
Thank
for being
you.
here and watching the chat and for your questions. Please, please, please treat yourselves. Give yourselves a gift. Be kind to yourselves. You know how I'm always telling you, treasure yourselves as I treasure you, because you are irreplaceable gems in the firmament. You need to take very good care of yourselves. One of the things you need to do for yourselves right now is to go out and pre-order this book. All right. This is kind of a hard sell, but I have to tell you, I love mythology. I love urban fantasy. I love wonderful, fully realized characters. Piper has it all in this series. So you
Thank you
really
so
need to
much.
read these books. Read them. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us on this, and anybody who joins us late. If you come after the fact and you decide to watch us asynchronously, thank you. Thank you for
Yes.
joining. And thank you for your interest in my writing and our works and our interactions. It's so much fun.
Thank you for being here, everyone. All right, go out, read some of Piper's books, treat yourselves, have some Thai food. Probably a good idea.
Oh, yeah.
Probably go over
So,
to
so many
Tars.
tasty things. I mean, and I'm here eating Japanese mochis, right?
Also, I'm like, the mochi, everything sounds good
They were
right
so
now.
easy to make. I mean, homemade is also very, very fun. I'll be posting on my
Oh,
Instagram pictures of it,
thank
but yeah, they were so easy to
you.
make.
Well, Piper, thank you for whetting our appetites for so many things. This was a delicious conversation. Thank you for coming to sip the tea with me. Everyone, we have book club tomorrow for more booky goodness in the afternoon at 4:30 p.m. Pacific. Do check out the event page on Facebook. Go to the link tree in my bio, visit my website, visit Patreon. I posted it everywhere. Come talk about books with us.
And
And
someday,
next,
oh,
yes.
sorry,
Yeah, no,
someday you and
please.
I do need to make an appearance back on the steampunk scene. Goodness,
Yes. Yes.
we will
Well,
have to
maybe
think of how and why, but that should happen.
we might just have to read Finding Cadence. So, I
Oh,
mean,
keeping cadence, yes, keeping
keeping
cadence.
cadence.
Oh
Yes.
gosh, that is a spicy read. It is a novelette, and it is a
Oh,
spicy read. I do believe I have it out on Amazon and also out via some of the other online retailers in digital, but I do not have it in print right now. So
that's all right.
I'll see about
We'll talk.
solving that in the future.
We'll talk. And once you have it up on your website for direct sale, also,
Yes,
that's going to be an option for people. So
by the end of the year.
we will find a way, Piper, to have you back on the show because this has been so fantastic and such a wonderful time chatting with you. And I will come up with a million excuses to have you back because you are an absolute delight.
Thank
So
you.
thank you. And thank you all. And oh, yeah, this is so nice. Thank you, Bill. Yeah, it's been wonderful getting to know Piper a bit more today. Everyone, we'll see you tomorrow for book club. I'll see you next month with Maz Maddox and Kurt Graves as our Sip the Tea guests. We're going to talk more about romance because we can. So
Yes.
go out, have a wonderful day, everyone. See you later. Cheers.